Hello everyone, welcome to my channel about writing stuff. My name's Camille and today we are talking about how to understand what your story is actually about. Someone told me to read Wired for Story by Lisa Cron, and I've read a lot of craft books, specifically Stephen King's book, Bird by Bird. And I love craft books. I love getting into the head of a fellow writer, especially because everyone's writing experience is very different. So before I went out and got the book, which I actually haven't gotten the book yet, but this week I listened to Lisa Cron's lecture at the School of Visual Art, and I listened to her TED Talk. And this question came up of, how do I know what my story is about? When you think about story, people say that every story has been told, which arguably, yes, every plot has been told. So then why do we read essentially the same stories over and over again? And it's because the characters change, their interactions, motivations, wants, desires, things like that. It's the basic idea of every single person is their own individual, so they all have their own individual story to tell. And at the end of Lisa's talk at the School of Visual Arts, she was doing a Q&A session, and someone asked, how do I figure out what my character wants? And I feel like this is a big question. It's one thing to sit down and write a heist novel, but if you don't know, what does my character want aside from the treasure at the end, or, what is the story about? What is the big thing that I, as the author, am trying to say about the world? How am I trying to connect to the reader on like a personal level or in a general way? It's this, what makes a story feel whole? And I feel like Lisa really tried to answer the question. She's like talking about, is there something missing? What's the big problem in that character's life? Not necessarily tied to the plot of the novel, but just like in your character's life. What's their backstory? What's their internal struggle? What do they want? What do they misbelieve? That's the big thing she talks about is misbelief. So I'll link all this below so you can watch it yourself, and I'll link to the book as well because I need to read it also. But this person asked this question of, how do I figure out what my character wants? And that is like the pinnacle of story. And if you don't know what your character wants, if you don't know what you're trying to say about the world, then your story can feel very empty. And it comes back around to every story has been told before, so why are you the only person who can tell this story? And it is that pinnacle thing of knowing what you're trying to say about the world. So, Lisa did a pretty good job of answering the question, but I don't feel like she really tacked down the how. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. How do you find out what you have to say? Because, after this guy asked this question, Lisa Cron addressed him and said, maybe you don't have anything to say. And I'm a firm believer that everyone has something to say. The problem is digging down inside yourself, dredging up all of your crap to really find what you have to say. And, you are the only person who can say it a certain way, and you are the only person who can phrase it in a way that will connect with that one other soul who needs that story, or is trying to understand something, or just wants to connect with someone else on a personal level. And that's the beauty of story, is that we can take really personal things that happen to our characters, really personal things that our characters want, and make it so that anyone, anywhere can connect to them. The more personal you make something, the harder it hits, I guess. But yeah, so how do we find out what we want to say? How do we find out what our story is about, what our characters want, what we want to say about the world, blah, blah, blah. And, this this phrase gets thrown around a lot of the tortured artist because, we are all tortured. Great art, I believe that great art does definitely come from struggle. And those are the things that you need to assess about yourself. It's a very vulnerable thing, but, take some time, sit down, and first brainstorm up or think of or recall or whatever what your personal struggles have been. What have you, sort of fought with? What have you suffered? What have you survived? Do you consider yourself like have you been victimized before? Do you consider yourself a victim, a survivor, or a thriver? And, a lot of these things, therapy helps with a lot of these things. But it's really looking back on your life and going, okay, what was my childhood really like? And maybe you grew up in a happy cookie cutter family, but then again, maybe there was some neglect. Maybe there was that one traumatizing moment. Maybe it was, a lack of attention or whatnot. And everyone experiences trauma differently. I'm also going to link below. There's this other TED Talk study thing that talks about ACEs. And ACEs pertains to this idea of childhood trauma. Say, for instance, you grew up in a household with an alcoholic parent, you would have one ACE. If you were abused growing up, you would have two ACEs, this kind of thing. And the more ACEs you have, the more likely you are to grow up with these mental illnesses, particularly PTSD, anxiety, depression, stuff like that. And I think a lot of this stuff is more common people, put out there. It's still kind of taboo to talk about, but I've talked about it before on this channel. My anxiety, depression, up and down kind of stuff, PTSD as well. But it's really coming down to what have you experienced and suffered, and depending on which age group you're writing for, how did you cope with those things in that age group? And I'll give you an example of this pertaining to story, because I feel like I'm kind of rambling. But I was abused growing up by a woman in my life who was not my blood relative, but was in my life for about 9 years. Physically abusive, mentally abusive, and psychologically abusive. And as a young person, I was totally a bully because I needed that control when I was that young, although I didn't know it then. So if I were to write a middle grade novel, in the way that I understand the world, or if I want to say something about the world, if I wrote a bully character, it would be that character doesn't even think about it. That character just kind of acts, needs that control, etc. And then when I was a teenager, I severely rebelled, acted out, lied, did drugs, drank, those kinds of things. And even in my teenage years, I wasn't self-aware to know what was going on. It was more of a self-medication kind of a thing. But now as an adult, I understand those things. So looking back, when I write stories, themes that are often found in my work are, the abuse or the neglect, or self-medicating. Found family is a big one. And, these are the big general statements about the world. What I write about, what the cycle of abuse looks like, things like this. But these are just themes. What my stories are actually about are my characters who go through these things, but come out of it at the end. Are you writing a story about abuse, or are you writing a story about how this character is breaking the cycle of abuse? Are you writing a story about mental illness, or are you writing a story about how someone can learn to live and be content with their mental illness? Are you writing a story about, this, or it's, there's a difference between theme and what your story is about. Theme is the basic thing. You're writing a story about, anxiety. It can't just be about your character having anxiety. There needs to be some sort of arc, some change inside your character of not that they, magically get rid of their anxiety, but they get to a place in their life where they have some control over it and they are content and they understand that they will have bad days. It is that character going through something and then by the end being able to go, okay, I'm a little bit stronger, I'm a little bit better. Unless you're writing a tragedy and everyone just goes downhill, but So that's my big how-to tip. What do you have to say? How do you find out what you have to say about the world or what your story is about? Dig into your own history and pain and suffering, and it really sucks and it's kind of maudlin, but do it because you are the only person who can tell that story. You are the only person with your particular individual experiences, and there is someone out there in the world who either needs that story or is looking for that story or would connect to that story in that kind of way. And that's what makes stories unique. You could have the same exact plot as a million other books, but what makes it unique is that internal struggle. It's that theme, the message, the what is this story about? What does this character want? What are their desires? And how are they struggling to get it? And your character's struggles should not just be pertaining to the plot. You're writing a heist novel, the struggle shouldn't just be, I'm fighting to get this treasure. It should be, I'm fighting to get this treasure while I am also battling this internal demon that's keeping me from achieving whatever the plot is. Layer it. That's what it is. It's layering. If the only obstacle standing between your main character and your antagonist and your main character's goals is the antagonist, that's not enough. There needs to be some internal struggle. And I'm going to say this because I started watching this again recently, but Law & Order SVU, Detective Benson's character arc through the whole series is just incredible. It is so good. So you have this character who is, she is the product of a rape. Her mom was raped, so she grew up with her mom, kind of shunning her, and her mom's a stumbling drunk, and yet she goes into this line of work where it is her job to hunt rapists, so it's very personal for her. But then she also has this internal struggle aside from, the pressures of her job where she can't form a long-term healthy relationship. She is warring with herself. She will not make any relationship work. All of these things, it's just she's keeping herself from this happiness. And it isn't until she succeeds in her job, it isn't until her partner leaves the show and she kind of hits rock bottom, and she starts kind of clawing back up, and she gets promoted in work and she tries really hard, and then something clicks for her to where she can finally say, okay, I can have a baby. I'm at a place now where I can have a baby. And it makes the people feel real because the plot in your book isn't the only thing going on with your character. Your character is also having those internal struggles that are very important to them, but not necessarily related 100% to the plot. So that was such a rambling mess. Sorry, guys, but that is what makes a story feel whole. That's what really nails it down for me. That's what makes me really passionate about writing a story too, is having those layers. So yeah, all of those resources will be in the comments. I have another resource for you today though. NaNoWriMo is coming up, and some great writerly friends of mine are doing this thing called NaNoInspo, and it's basically, a hook on the NaNoWriMo Novel Writing Month, where it's like nano inspiration. We are here to inspire you. It's headed by Martin McConnell, which I will link his website in the description box. But he is a great writer, and everyone that is sort of participating, we've all been writing a while, we've all been through Nano. We all have, a decent handle on our own processes. A lot of us vlog and do videos. So we're doing this thing called NaNoInspo to help inspire you if maybe it's your first time doing nano, second time doing nano, maybe you are writing your first or second novel. We're here to push you, give you that motivation that you need. And, you know, for me on a personal level, if you are doing nano this month, hit me up in the comments, or you can DM me on Twitter, and I would be more than happy to help you get through those plot holes. The main thing about nano is to get the words down. No editing, just write straight through. I think the average is like 1,600, 1,700 words a day to hit that 50,000 word mark. So we're here to help you push yourself. There's also prizes and things like that. So I'll link the website and all that stuff below. But yeah, if you have any questions, as always, you can comment, video request topics, tweet me at Camille Singer. And thanks for watching. So I will see you guys next time. But for now, you should be finding out what your story is about, and then you should be writing it.